The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stood silent as Admiral Vecthar approached the speaking platform. His scales gleamed under the soft blue lights, and his 4 eyes scanned the assembled representatives from 100 different worlds. He carried a data tablet in his clawed hand, and his tail swished with barely contained excitement. "Honored council members," Vecthar began, his voice translator converting his clicks and hisses into the common tongue. "The Kreth hegemony formally requests colonization rights to the Sol system, located in Sector 773 of the Outer Rim." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Elder Thawson, a floating gas being from the core worlds, pulsed with colors that indicated confusion. The Sol system? That barren cluster? Why would the mighty Kreth want such a worthless prize? Vecthar's mouthparts formed what his species considered a smile. "Worthless to some, perhaps, but our surveys show the third planet has abundant water, a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and mineral-rich moons throughout the system. It meets all requirements for Kreth settlement." "But what of the humans?" a small voice chirped from the back. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translators interpreted as laughter. Vecthar turned to see who had spoken. It was a young pibling, barely old enough to have earned a council seat. The small, furry creature looked embarrassed as hundreds of eyes focused on it. "The humans," Vecthar repeated, his tone amused. "You mean the ghost story? The legend that drunk cargo haulers tell in station bars?" The pibling's fur changed to a darker shade, a sign of discomfort. "My grandfather claimed he saw one once. He said they were tall, with forward-facing eyes, like predators. He said they came from a world so dangerous that it made them into super warriors who could crush starships with their bare hands?" Vecthar interrupted. Yes, we've all heard the tales. Let me save you some embarrassment, young one. There are no humans. There never were." Elder Thawson pulsed again, this time with colors of agreement. "The Admiral speaks truth. I have served on this council for 300 standard years. The human question has been investigated many times. What have we found? Nothing. A few abandoned space stations with strange markings. Some old satellites that stopped broadcasting millennia ago. Ruins on a few moons that suggest a primitive industrial culture once existed." "Exactly," Vecthar said, warming to his subject. "At best, there was once a pre-space civilization in that system. They probably destroyed themselves in some primitive war before achieving faster-than-light travel. At worst, the whole thing is a fabrication, invented by smugglers to keep others away from their hiding spots." A counselor from the science cast, a being who looked like a walking tree, raised one of its branches. "Our xenoarchaeologists have studied the evidence. If humans existed, they would have been a biological impossibility. The third planet of Sol has gravity 13% higher than galactic standard. The oxygen content in the atmosphere is dangerously high, combustible even. And the fauna recorded in ancient databases shows predators that would be classified as megafauna on civilized worlds. Nothing intelligent could evolve in such conditions," another counselor added. "It would require adaptations that contradict everything we know about the development of sapient life. High gravity would make space travel nearly impossible. The dangerous environment would prevent the cooperation necessary for civilization." "I've studied the myths myself, council members. They claim humans could run for hours without stopping, that they could heal from terrible injuries, that they could survive without food for weeks and without water for days. They say human bones were so dense they could break through standard armor, that their primitive chemical weapons could pierce modern shields." He paused for effect. "It's nonsense. Physics doesn't work that way. Biology doesn't work that way." "But the stories are so widespread," the young pibling insisted. "Ships that entered the Sol system and never returned. Distress calls that spoke of pale-skinned demons with binocular vision. The tales of the persistence predators who never stopped chasing their prey." "Space is dangerous," Vecthar replied patiently. "Ships disappear for many reasons. Navigation errors, equipment failure, pirates. As for the rest, fear creates monsters in the mind. Some explorers probably encountered malfunctioning defense systems around those old stations, and imagined they were being attacked by mythical warriors. The tree-being counselor rustled its branches. We've sent 12 exploration missions to the Sol system over the past 2,000 years. All reported the same findings. Ruins, debris, and silence. No life signs above bacterial level. No active technology. No responses to hailing frequencies. The system is dead, if it was ever alive. Elder Thawson floated to the center of the chamber. I propose we vote on the Kreth request. All those in favor of granting colonization rights to the Sol system. Hundreds of appendages, tentacles, and energy fields signaled agreement. Only the young Pibbling abstained, its fur still dark with uncertainty. The motion passes, Thawson announced. Admiral Vekthar, the Sol system is yours. May your colonies prosper. Vekthar bowed to the council, his heart swelling with pride. This would be his legacy. 300 ships stood ready to claim the system. Within a generation, Kreth settlements would cover that supposedly dangerous third planet. They would mine the asteroids, terraform the moons, and build great cities in the sky. As the council session ended and representatives filed out, Vekthar overheard two elderly members talking. "Do you think we should have warned him?" one asked. "Warned him about what? Fairy tales?" "I suppose you're right. Still, my mentor once told me that the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence." Superstitious nonsense. Besides, if humans were real and wanted to be found, they would have revealed themselves by now. Vekthar smiled to himself as he left the chamber. Let the old ones have their ghost stories. He was a practical being who dealt in facts and data. The surveys proved it. The sensors confirmed it. And in 3 standard months, his fleet would arrive to claim it. Back in his flagship, Vekthar stood before a holographic display of the Sol system. The third planet rotated slowly, its blue oceans and white clouds looking almost inviting. Almost. He zoomed in on the strange concentration of structures on the surface. Cities, perhaps, but long abandoned. Or so the sensors claimed. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered his crew. "We depart at dawn, and somebody find me all the data on these human myths. I want to know every ridiculous detail. It will make a fine entertainment for the journey." His officers saluted and rushed to comply. Vekthar took one last look at the blue planet. "Humans," he muttered to himself, his translator giving the word a mocking tone. "What fools believe in humans?" The hologram rotated in silence, keeping its secrets. 3 months of faster-than-light travel had given Admiral Vekthar plenty of time to study the human legends. He sat in his command chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing ancient texts, recovered data fragments, and contradictory reports from the few exploration missions that had visited Sol. The stories were ridiculous. According to the myths, humans had evolved from tree-dwelling creatures who came down to hunt on open plains. They supposedly threw rocks and sharpened sticks with such accuracy they could kill from a distance. Their bodies could regulate temperature through liquid secretion, allowing them to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They formed complex social groups, created art, and somehow developed technology, despite living on a world that should have crushed any civilization before it could begin. "Superstitious garbage," Vekthar muttered, closing the files. A chime announced a visitor. His chief science officer, Kalran, entered the chamber. Her scales were a duller shade than Vekthar's, marking her as a scholar rather than a warrior. "Admiral, we've dropped out of faster-than-light travel. We're on the edge of the Sol system." Vekthar rose from his seat, suddenly energized. "Excellent. Begin full-spectrum scans. I want to know everything about this system before we claim it." The command deck buzzed with activity as Vekthar took his position. 300 warships hung in the void, their weapons charged and shields ready. Standard procedure, even for an empty system. Initial scans complete, Kelran reported. I'm detecting, Admiral, this is strange. What is it? There are structures throughout the system. Many structures. Stations in orbit around the large gas giant. Mining operations in the asteroid belt. Satellites around multiple planets. And the activity is concentrated around the third planet, just as the old records suggested. Vekthar felt a twinge of unease. Are they operational? Unclear. I'm not detecting any energy signatures that match galactic technology. No plasma cores, no quantum reactors, no zero-point generators. But there's definitely power running through these structures. What kind of power? Kelran's scales rippled with confusion. Primitive chemical reactions mostly. Some fission generators. Basic solar collectors. Nothing that should support a spacefaring civilization. Automated systems, Vekthar decided. Ancient machines still running on whatever fuel they had stored. Send scouts to investigate the nearest stations. Over the next 2 days, the scouts returned with increasingly puzzling metal hulls with no energy shielding. Computer systems that ran on electrical circuits instead of quantum processors. It's like they never discovered proper technology, one scout pilot reported. Everything is mechanical. Heavy, inefficient, but it works. More disturbing were the probes sent to observe the third planet. The world was absolutely teeming with activity. The night side glowed with artificial lights. The day side showed massive cities, agricultural zones, and industrial complexes. Electromagnetic radiation flooded the space around the planet. Radio waves, television broadcasts, and data transmissions in formats the Kreth computers found difficult to decode. There's definitely a civilization down there, Helron said, her voice uncertain, but they're not responding to any of our hailing frequencies. They're using primitive radio, but they're not answering us. Maybe they don't have receivers capable of detecting our signals, Vekthar suggested. Or maybe they're choosing not to respond. Vekthar dismissed the idea. A species advanced enough to choose would be advanced enough to have proper technology. What else have the probes discovered? Kelron pulled up a holographic display of the third planet. This is what concerns me, Admiral. The gravity is exactly what the old records claimed, 1.3 times galactic standard. The oxygen concentration is 21%. The surface hosts multiple species of megafauna, predators weighing several tons, and yet there's a population of approximately 8 billion beings living on this world. 8 billion? Vekthar's eyes widened. Living in those conditions? Yes. And Admiral, our xenobiologists have been analyzing the limited biological data from atmospheric samples. They found traces of DNA that match the descriptions in the human myths. Bipedal, binocular vision, endoskeletal, dense bone structure, high muscle density. The command deck fell silent. Every crew member turned to look at their admiral. Vekthar forced himself to laugh. So they exist. That doesn't make them dangerous. They're using chemical rockets for the God's sake. They haven't even developed energy shields. We could disable their entire civilization from orbit. Should we attempt communication again? Kelran asked. No. If they wanted to talk, they would have answered by now. They're primitives hiding on their world, probably terrified that we've found them. Prepare for colonization procedures. We'll give them one chance to surrender peacefully. If they refuse, we proceed with standard protocols. Admiral, the regulations require we offer full diplomatic contact before any colonization of an inhabited world. Those regulations apply to civilized species, Vekthar snapped. These beings don't even have a seat on the council. They're not registered. They've been hiding in this backwater for who knows how long, ignoring all attempts at contact. We offered peace. They chose silence. He stood, addressing his entire crew. Listen well. We've traveled 3 months to claim this system. We've followed every regulation. We've attempted communication. Whatever is on that planet has had centuries to join galactic civilization. They chose isolation. Now they'll learn the consequences. The crew murmured agreement. though Kelran still looked troubled. "Begin descent," Vekthar ordered. "Battle groups 1 through 5 will take positions over the major population centers. Disable their communications first, then target any military installations. We'll break their will to resist before landing any ground forces." As his fleet moved into the inner system, Vekthar watched the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. It was beautiful, in a deadly sort of way. Those swirling white clouds hid a world of crushing gravity and dangerous oxygen levels. Whatever species lived down there had adapted to hell itself. But adaptation meant nothing against superior technology. "Admiral," a tactical officer called out, "we're detecting unusual readings from the planet's moon." "What kind of readings?" "Thermal signatures, power fluctuations. Something's on the dark side of their moon, but our sensors can't penetrate whatever's blocking them." "Probably more ancient stations," Vekthar said dismissively. "Ignore it. Focus on the primary target." The fleet descended into the gravity well of the third planet. Warning alarms began to sound. "Multiple radar locks from the surface," the tactical officer reported, voice rising. "They're tracking us." "With primitive radar?" Vekthar scoffed. "Let them watch. It will make the lesson more effective." "Admiral, I'm detecting movement in high orbit, objects separating from what we thought were dead satellites." "Identify them." A pause. "They're weapons platforms, kinetic weapons. They were camouflaged to look like debris." Vekthar felt his blood run cold. "How many?" "Hundreds, no thousands. They've been hiding in plain sight." Before Vekthar could respond, the platforms activated. Massive railguns that had been silent for decades roared to life, hurling metal slugs at velocities that made them nearly impossible to intercept. "Shields up," Vekthar screamed. "Evasive maneuvers." But the Kreth shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. The primitive kinetic rounds punched through them like they weren't even there. The first 3 Kreth ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. And from the planet below, a transmission finally came. A voice speaking the common tongue with a strange accent. "This is Earth Defense Command. You have entered sovereign territory. Leave now, or we will show you why humans are not a myth." The command deck erupted in chaos. Alarms screamed as more Kreth ships took hits from the orbital railguns. Vekthar gripped his command chair, scales turning pale with shock. "Return fire," he roared. "All batteries, target those platforms." Energy beams lanced out from the Kreth fleet, striking the weapon platforms. Several exploded in spectacular fashion, but for every one destroyed, 2 more seemed to activate. They had been hidden everywhere, disguised as old satellites, buried in the shadows of asteroids, camouflaged as space debris. "They've been preparing for this," Kelran said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "For decades, maybe longer." "Impossible," Vekthar hissed. "They're primitives. How could they—" Another ship exploded, then another. "Admiral, we need to pull back," his tactical officer urged. "We're sitting targets in this gravity well." Vekthar's pride warred with his survival instinct. He'd told the Council this would be easy. He'd mocked the legends, and now his fleet was dying. "All ships, ascend to high orbit," he ordered through clenched teeth. "Maintain defensive formation. Prepare for atmospheric bombardment. If they want war, we'll give them war." The Kreth fleet began to climb, trading fire with the orbital platforms. Vekthar watched the battle display with growing dread. He'd lost 30 ships already. 30 ships to weapons that should have been obsolete 1,000 years ago. "In range for planetary bombardment," the weapons officer reported. "Target their major cities," Vekthar commanded. 3 volleys. That should break their spirit. Energy beams stabbed down through the atmosphere, designed to superheat the air and create devastating explosions on the surface. But as the beams descended, something impossible happened. Energy shields, real energy shields, flickered to life over every major city. The bombardment splashed harmlessly against barriers that shouldn't exist. "They have shield technology," Kelran gasped. "But our scans showed—" "They were hiding it," Vecthar realized, his voice hollow. "Everything. They were hiding everything." From below the shields, weapons launched. Not energy weapons, but solid projectiles riding pillars of chemical fire. Missiles, hundreds of them, their targeting systems crude but effective. "Point defense, intercept those missiles," Vecthar ordered. The Kreth ship's automated defenses spun to life, shooting down the incoming projectiles. But there were too many. Some got through. When they struck Kreth shields, they didn't explode. Instead, they punched through and detonated inside the shield perimeter, tearing into hulls with shaped charges that seemed specifically designed to defeat energy barriers. "They know our technology," Vecthar said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "They've studied us. They know exactly how our defenses work. Admiral, we have atmospheric craft incoming, dozens of them." On the display, small craft rose from the planet's surface. They were angular, aggressive-looking things that flew on chemical jets and left trails of fire in their wake. Primitive by galactic standards, but fast, impossibly fast. "Those acceleration curves are impossible," the tactical officer said. "No organic crew could survive those G-forces. They must be drones." But they weren't drones. Vecthar watched in disbelief as the craft engaged his ships in a series of slashing attacks. They moved like predatory animals, diving in to fire missiles and kinetic rounds, before pulling away at accelerations that should have turned any pilot into liquid. "How are they surviving those maneuvers?" he demanded. Kelran's voice was soft, awed. "Because they evolved in high gravity. Their bodies are built for this. What would kill us is merely uncomfortable for them." One of the atmospheric fighters got too close to a Kreth destroyer. Point defense caught it, tearing the craft apart. But instead of fleeing, the pilot aimed his dying ship at the destroyer and accelerated. The collision ripped a hole in the Kreth vessel's hull, depressurizing 3 decks. "They're insane," Vecthar breathed. "They're killing themselves just to damage us." More fighters followed suit. It was a calculated tactic. Trade one small craft for damage to a capital ship. The Kreth fleet, designed for civilized warfare where both sides valued their lives, had no counter for such madness. "Admiral, we need to withdraw," Kelran pleaded. "We're not prepared for this kind of enemy." "No," Vecthar slammed his fist on the command console. "Deploy ground forces. We'll take their cities the old-fashioned way. Our warriors are trained, augmented, and equipped with the best weapons in the galaxy. Let's see how these humans fare in close combat." Against his better judgment, Kelran relayed the orders. Dropships launched from the fleet, carrying thousands of Kreth soldiers toward the planet's surface. They were elite troops, each one cybernetically enhanced and armed with plasma weapons that could melt through steel. The dropships descended through a storm of anti-aircraft fire, losing dozens to the primitive but effective human defenses. The survivors made it to the surface, landing on the outskirts of a city the humans called Sydney. Vecthar watched through drone feeds as his troops deployed. The city ahead was a maze of concrete and glass, much more developed than the sensors had suggested. His warriors moved forward in standard formation, confident in their superiority. Then the humans came out to meet them. At first, Vecthar thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The beings that emerged from the city were tall, as the legends claimed, but they looked fragile. They wore primitive armor, ceramic plates and woven fabric, and carried chemical projectile weapons. Their faces showed a range of emotions, from fear to determination. They were so vulnerable looking, so soft. The Kreth warriors opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up the dawn sky. But the humans didn't break. They scattered into cover with practiced efficiency, using the terrain in ways the Kreth didn't understand. Their return fire was devastating. high-velocity rounds that punched through Kreth armor designed to stop energy weapons. Warriors who had never known defeat fell screaming to the ground. "Use grenades," the Kreth ground commander ordered. "Flush them out." The Kreth threw their explosive devices. The humans threw their own, simple metal spheres filled with chemical explosives and fragments of sharpened steel. When they detonated, they turned the battlefield into a meat grinder. But worse than the weapons was the humans themselves. When the Kreth tried to close for melee combat, confident in their augmented strength, they learned the terrible truth about evolution on a high-gravity world. Humans didn't need augmentation. Their bones were dense enough to break Kreth chitin with bare fists. Their muscles, evolved to fight against crushing gravity, could tear through armor. They moved with a speed and ferocity that no galactic species could match. And they didn't stop. When wounded, they kept fighting. When outnumbered, they kept fighting. When all logic said to retreat, they advanced. Vecthar watched his ground forces get systematically destroyed by an enemy that should have been easy prey. The humans were coordinated, disciplined, and absolutely merciless. They used tactics the Kreth had never encountered: ambushes, traps, psychological warfare. They played recordings of Kreth death screams to demoralize the soldiers. They targeted officers first, decapitating command structures. They showed no mercy and expected none. Within 6 hours, the beachhead was annihilated. "Get our troops out of there," Vecthar screamed. "Recall all ground forces." But it was too late. The humans had surrounded the landing zones. Dropships trying to evacuate were shot down by portable missile launchers. Kreth soldiers who tried to run were hunted down by humans who never seemed to tire, never seemed to quit. Kelran approached Vecthar's chair, her scales completely white with fear. "Admiral, we've lost 40% of our fleet. All ground forces are either dead or captured. We need to retreat." "To where?" Vecthar asked bitterly. "How do I face the Council and tell them I lost a war to a species that doesn't officially exist?" As if in answer, a new transmission came from the planet. This time, it was a video feed. A human stood before the camera. She was female, Vecthar's database informed him, though the gender differences were subtle compared to Kreth. She was scarred, her face marked with old wounds. Her eyes, those forward-facing predator's eyes, looked directly at the camera with an intensity that made Vecthar want to look away. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command," she said in perfect common tongue. "You came to our world thinking us weak, thinking us primitive. You believed we were a myth." She stepped aside, and the camera panned to show hundreds of Kreth prisoners, wounded but alive, being tended by human medics. "We are not a myth, Admiral Vecthar." Admiral Vecthar stared at the human commander on his screen. Behind her, Kreth soldiers sat in neat rows, receiving medical treatment from their captors. The sight made his blood boil. The Kreth hegemony did not surrender. The Kreth hegemony did not lose. "You have one chance," Commander Chen continued, her voice calm and measured. "Leave our system. Return to your council. Tell them that humanity claims the Sol system as sovereign territory. Tell them what happens to those who test us." Vecthar cut the transmission. His command deck was silent, except for the soft beeping of damaged systems and the groans of wounded crew members. Half his fleet was crippled or destroyed. His ground forces were gone, and still he had not even scratched the humans' true capabilities. "Admiral," Kelran said quietly, "we should accept their terms. We're beaten." "No." Vecthar rose from his command chair. "We still have orbital superiority. We still have weapons they cannot match. Charge the main batteries. We'll glass their cities from orbit. Turn their precious world into a radioactive wasteland." "That's genocide," Kelran protested. "The Council will." "The Council isn't here," Vecthar roared. "They didn't lose 120 ships to primitives. They didn't watch their soldiers get torn apart by beings who should be begging for mercy. I will not return in defeat." He turned to his weapons officer. Target their power grids, their water supplies, their agricultural centers. We'll starve them into submission. The weapons officer hesitated, but finally nodded. Charging weapons, 30 seconds to firing range. Vecthar felt a savage satisfaction. Let the humans be clever. Let them be fierce. They couldn't stop orbital bombardment. They couldn't. Every screen in the command deck went black. What happened? Vecthar demanded. I don't know, the tactical officer said, frantically working his console. All our systems just stopped responding. Lights flickered. Life support stuttered. The ship's quantum computer, which controlled everything from navigation to weapons, began displaying text in a language Vecthar didn't recognize. English, his translator supplied. The human language. Hello, Admiral Vecthar, the message read. This is Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, United States Cyber Command. Your systems are now under my control. Have a nice day. That's impossible, Vecthar whispered. Our systems are quantum encrypted. There's no way a primitive species could. The ship's speakers crackled to life. A young male voice, sounding almost cheerful, spoke in common tongue with the same strange accent Commander Chen had. See, we've been hacking each other's systems since we invented computers. We've had centuries of practice. Your fancy quantum stuff? It's just a different puzzle. And humans are really, really good at solving puzzles, especially when our survival depends on it. All across the fleet, Kreth ships went dark. Some came back online, but with their weapon systems disabled. Others began firing on each other, as their targeting systems were hijacked. A few tried to jump to faster-than-light speeds, only to have their drives shut down mid-sequence, leaving them stranded. Restoring manual control, Kelran shouted, physically disconnecting consoles from the main computer. All ships, disconnect from your networks. Go to manual operation. But the damage was done. Half the fleet was helpless, and as they struggled to regain control, new contacts appeared on the few sensors still functioning. Human ships. They emerged from behind the moon, where they had been hiding in the sensor shadow. They were ugly things by galactic standards. Blocky, functional, covered in weapons and armor. Some still used primitive chemical rockets. Others had clearly reverse-engineered alien technology, creating hybrid drives that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts. But they worked, and there were hundreds of them. How? Vecthar asked, his voice broken. How did we not see them? Because we were looking for our technology, Kelran said softly. We scanned for quantum signatures, plasma drives, zero-point generators. They hid using methods we'd never consider. Low-tech solutions to high-tech problems. The human fleet spread out, surrounding the Kreth vessels. They didn't fire immediately. Instead, another transmission came through. Commander Chen appeared on screen again. I told you, we were a warning, Admiral. Humans have been watching the Galactic Council for 70 years, ever since one of your scout ships crashed in our desert, and we figured out we weren't alone. The screen split, showing archived footage. A Kreth scout ship, ancient and damaged, lying in sand dunes. Human soldiers approaching cautiously. Scientists examining the technology. Engineers taking it apart piece by piece. We reverse-engineered everything, Shen explained. Your drives, your computers, your weapons. We learned your languages, we studied your tactics, we watched your council sessions through hacked communication relays, and we realized something terrifying. She leaned closer to the camera. You've forgotten how to fight real wars. You've had peace for so long, you've gone soft. You fight for resources and territory, with rules and regulations. You calculate acceptable losses and negotiate treaties. But we humans, we evolved fighting each other. We've had wars that killed millions. We've created weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We know how to fight dirty. We know how to win at any cost. We were going to reveal ourselves eventually, she continued. Join your council. share our unique perspective. But then we intercepted your colonization request. We heard you call us myths. We watched you mock our existence. And we decided to teach you a lesson about assumptions. Vecthar found his voice. This was a trap, all of it. The silence, the primitive technology on display. You wanted us to attack. We wanted you to underestimate us, Chen corrected. And you did. Now you'll take a message back to your council. Tell them humanity exists. Tell them we claim the Sol system. And tell them that if anyone else comes here with hostile intent, they'll learn what we learned on the plains of Africa, in the trenches of Europe, and in the ashes of Hiroshima. What did you learn? Vecthar asked, though he feared he knew the answer. That the most dangerous predator isn't the biggest or the strongest. It's the one that never stops hunting, the one that learns from every fight, the one that turns everything, even its own weakness, into a weapon. The human ships began moving, herding the Kreth fleet toward the edge of the system. Not attacking, just escorting them out like unwanted guests. You're letting us go? Vecthar asked, surprised despite everything. We're not monsters, Admiral. We don't want to kill you. We just want you to leave and never come back. Chen's expression softened slightly. We'll return your captured soldiers. They'll need medical treatment we can't provide. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Or consider it a reminder that we could have killed them and chose mercy instead. The Council will send a larger fleet, Vecthar warned. They won't tolerate this insult. Chen smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. Let them try. We've been preparing for invasion for 7 decades. We've built weapons you can't imagine. We've created contingencies for every scenario. We've united every nation, every culture, every human on this planet behind one single purpose: protect our home. Do you know what humans are capable of when we work together toward a common goal? We went from riding horses to walking on our moon in less than a century. We went from basic computers to hacking quantum systems in 50 years. What do you think we'll do with another few decades of preparation? She gestured to someone off screen. Show him. The display changed. Deep space, beyond the orbit of Pluto. Human construction platforms, building something massive. Railguns the size of skyscrapers. Kinetic weapons that could strike targets light minutes away. Missile platforms that could launch thousands of warheads simultaneously. And shields, proper energy shields, protecting it all. This is Fortress Armstrong, Chen said. Our first defensive platform. We have 10 more under construction. By the time your council organizes another fleet, we'll have 100. And that's just our fixed defenses. Our mobile fleet is growing every day. Vecthar felt something he'd never experienced in his long military career. True fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what these humans represented. They were everything the galactic species had left behind. Aggressive, paranoid, relentless. They were what civilized races had evolved away from. They were predators who had learned to build spaceships. Go home, Admiral, Chen said gently. Tell your council the truth. Humans are not a myth. We're a reality. And we're staying. The transmission ended. Around Vecthar, his shattered fleet limped toward the jump point, escorted every kilometer by watchful human ships. Kelron approached him one last time. What will you tell the council? Vecthar looked at the blue planet shrinking behind them. The truth, that we found humans, that they're everything the legends claimed and worse, that the Sol system belongs to them, and any species foolish enough to challenge that deserves what they get. They'll call you a coward. Let them. Then let them come here and see for themselves what it means to fight a species that evolved in hell and learned to love it. The journey back to the Galactic Council felt like it took forever. Admiral Vecthar spent the weeks in his private chambers, composing and recomposing his report. How did one explain the inexplicable? How did one admit to being outsmarted by a species the entire galaxy considered fictional? His fleet, what remained of it, limped into council space like wounded animals returning to their den. Less than half his ships survived. The others were destroyed, captured, or so damaged they'd been left behind in neutral space. Word of the disaster had already spread. By the time Vecthar's flagship docked at the council station, representatives from dozens of worlds were demanding answers. The council chamber was packed. Every seat filled. Standing room only in the galleries. Vecthar walked to the speaking platform feeling every eye upon him. His scales had dulled to an unhealthy gray. He looked like a warrior who had aged a decade in mere months. Elder Thawson pulsed with colors of concern. Admiral Vecthar, your report, please. What happened in the Sol system? Vecthar activated the holographic display. Images filled the chamber. Human ships, human weapons, the battle damage to his fleet. A recording of Commander Chen's transmission played for all to see. The chamber, usually filled with chatter, fell into stunned silence. Humans are real, Vecthar said simply. They exist. They have existed for millennia, watching us, studying us, preparing for the day we would come for their world. And when we came, we walked into a trap 70 years in the making. The young pibling who had warned about humans stood up, fur rippling with vindication. I told you, my grandfather was right. But there was no satisfaction in being right. The implications were too terrifying. A military representative from the warrior caste, a heavily armored being called Cross, spoke up. This is unacceptable. We must assemble a proper fleet. Show these humans what happens when they defy the council. No. The word came from an unexpected source. Kelran had accompanied Vecthar to the council, and now she stepped forward. You don't understand what we're dealing with. I've analyzed every second of combat data. I've studied their tactics, their technology, their psychology. Attacking humanity again would be suicide. How can you say that? Cross demanded. We have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, technology developed over 10,000 years of galactic civilization. Kelran's scales rippled with a pattern that meant fear mixed with respect. And they have something we lost. Desperation. They're a species that evolved on a death world. Do you know what that means? Their planet tried to kill them every single day of their evolution. Predators that could crush them. Diseases that could wipe them out. Weather that could freeze or boil them. Their own gravity trying to drag them down. And they survived all of it by becoming the most adaptable, most relentless species imaginable. She pulled up a holographic display showing human biology. Look at this. Their bodies can heal from injuries that would kill most galactic species. They can survive temperature ranges that would incapacitate us. They can go without food for weeks, without water for days, and still fight. They have redundant systems for everything vital. They're built to survive. Another scientist, the tree being from before, rustled its branches. But their technology is primitive. Chemical weapons, kinetic projectiles. We saw this. That's what they wanted us to see, Vecthar interjected. They hid their true capabilities. They studied our ships, learned our weaknesses, and built weapons specifically designed to defeat us. Their cyber warfare capabilities are beyond anything we've encountered. They turned our own ships against us. How is that possible? Elder Thawson asked. Because they've been fighting cyber wars against each other for over a century, Kelran explained. Nation against nation, corporation against corporation, individual against individual. They've had to constantly improve their defenses while finding new ways to attack. It's made them better at digital warfare than species that have had peaceful networks for millennia. Cross wasn't convinced. So they're clever. That doesn't make them invincible. We send a larger fleet, one prepared for their tactics. You're not listening, Vecthar said, his voice sharp. It's not about the size of the fleet. It's about the nature of the enemy. Humans don't fight like we do. We fight for resources, for territory, for political gain. We have rules, protocols. We value our lives and the lives of our soldiers. We calculate acceptable losses and retreat when the cost becomes too high. He pulled up the footage of human fighters ramming his ships. Humans fight for survival, for their home, for their species. They don't calculate acceptable losses. They calculate how to win at any cost. They have weapons they call nuclear bombs that can destroy entire cities. They built thousands of them and pointed them at each other. They were willing to destroy their own planet rather than surrender to their enemies. That's the mindset we're dealing with. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and horrified exclamations. That's insane, someone shouted. Exactly, Vecthar agreed. By our standards, they're insane. They're a species that evolved in constant warfare, against their environment, against other species, against each other. They wrote books about war, created art about war, built their entire civilizations with war as a constant factor. We've had peace for 10,000 years. They've had peace for less than a century, and even that's questionable. Kelran continued the briefing, but here's what you need to understand. They don't want to conquer the galaxy. They just want to be left alone. Commander Chen made that clear. They're willing to coexist, even to trade and share knowledge eventually. But they will defend their territory with every weapon at their disposal. And they have weapons we can't counter, Vecthar added. Not because we lack the technology, but because we lack the mindset. They think in ways we don't. They see weakness where we see strength. They turn disadvantages into advantages. Fighting them is like fighting a mirror that shows you every flaw you didn't know you had. Elder Thassin pulsed with colors of deep thought. What do you recommend, Admiral? Grant them what they want. Recognize the Sol system as sovereign human territory. Establish a coffee exclusion zone. Let them develop at their own pace, and hope, genuinely hope, that when they're ready to join galactic civilization, they choose diplomacy over conquest. You think they could conquer us? Cross asked skeptically. I think if they wanted to, they'd find a way, Vecthar said quietly. They're a species that went from riding animals to landing on their moon in 60 years. From basic computing to quantum hacking in 50. They advance faster than any species in recorded galactic history. What do you think they'll be capable of in 100 years? 1,000. The chamber fell silent as that sank in. The young Pibbling spoke up again, voice trembling. My grandfather said something else about humans. He said they're persistence predators. They don't chase you until you collapse from exhaustion like normal predators. They chase you until you collapse from exhaustion. They never stop, never quit, never forget. Maybe we should listen to them. Thassin pulsed again, this time with colors of decision. I call for a vote. All in favor of establishing the Sol exclusion zone and recognizing human sovereignty over their system. The vote was unanimous. It's settled then, Thassin announced. The Sol system is hereby recognized as human territory. No council ship is to enter without explicit permission. We will send a diplomatic envoy offering peace and eventual contact when humanity is ready. As the council session ended, Vecthar stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of council space, was a blue planet, full of beings who had become legends before they ever left their world. Kelran joined him. Do you think they'll accept peace? I think they want peace, Vecthar said, but they'll prepare for war. That's what survivors do. Should we be afraid of them? Vecthar considered the question. He thought about Commander Chen's scarred face, about the human soldiers who kept fighting even when wounded, about the cyber specialist who had taken joy in hacking his systems. He thought about a species that had survived everything their world threw at them and emerged stronger. Yes, he finally said, we should be afraid, but we should also be grateful. Grateful that they're willing to settle for their own star system, Because if humans ever decide they want more, the galaxy won't be able to stop them. The only thing that can limit humanity is humanity itself. Let's hope they stay content with their corner of space. As they watched, a ship prepared to depart for the Sol system, a diplomatic vessel carrying an olive branch and a message of peace. It would be humanity's choice whether to accept it. Back on Earth, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the same bunker she'd transmitted from weeks before. Around her, the war room slowly returned to peacetime operations. Soldiers celebrated. Politicians argued about what to do next. Scientists analyzed the captured Kreth technology. Her second-in-command approached. The Council has recognized our sovereignty. They're sending a diplomatic ship. Chen nodded, unsurprised. Good. Let them come, but keep the defenses active. Keep building, keep preparing. You don't trust them? I trust that they're scared of us right now. But fear fades. We need to make sure that by the time they're not afraid anymore, we're too strong to challenge. And what about joining the Galactic Council eventually? Chen looked up at the ceiling, as if she could see through it to the stars beyond. Maybe someday, when we can meet them as equals, not as primitives begging for acceptance. Humans didn't climb to the top of Earth's food chain by being weak. We won't start now. She turned to leave, then paused. And keep the propaganda going. Let the galaxy keep telling stories about humans. Let them whisper about what we might be capable of. Fear isn't just a weapon. It's the best defense we have. As she walked out, she passed a poster on the wall. It showed Earth from space, with words written below in a dozen human languages. They thought we were a myth. Let's keep it that way. In the depths of space, human construction crews continued their work. Building, preparing, waiting. Somewhere out in the galaxy, other species looked toward the Sol exclusion zone and wondered what the humans were really like. Were they as dangerous as Admiral Vecthar claimed? Were they the monsters from old spacer tales? Or were they potential friends, allies, partners in exploring the cosmos? The answer was simple. They were human. And for a species that had spent millions of years learning to survive on a planet that tried to kill them daily, surviving among the stars would be easy. They were real, they were watching, and they would never be myths again.